I'm a preacher's daughter.
And I'm Eden, and I'm also a preacher's daughter.
And this is Gay Girls. Good God!
Christian content from a queer perspective.
Just had add a little flair to it.
A little bit of spice. Dropping some Tonys on it today.
Yes. Mm-hmm. In honor of, food.
Food.
Because we're filming on Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah.
This, normal people, they're with their family on Thanksgiving Day. And us, we're doing this.
Yes.
This is our festive activity.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. I'm thankful for biblically accurate angels.
Which, for anyone not watching on YouTube, which you're missing out if you're not watching on YouTube, to be totally honest.
We're spectacles.
We're something to behold, to say the least.
Behold.
Kale is dressed as a biblically accurate angel. I will leave that to your imagination if you're not watching yourself. Whereas I am, would you say, a pornographically accurate demon? I don't know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's definitely giving the demons. They had the calendar on the wall, and you're the calendar girl for the demons. Yeah.
Or like a 13-year-old girl's Pinterest board about supernatural inspired
supernatural.
Makeup looks.
Yeah, it is kind of giving a little bit of vampire, which Satan.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm Satan. Yeah.
No, vampires are Satan.
And transgender women.
Satan. So, Eden, what are you praying for this Thursday?
This random Thursday out of the year. I think I am praying for, honestly, the farmers right now. I think that in the United States and all across the world, we're about to go into winter, and the climate is getting...
It's going to be a tough one.
Mama, it's getting bad. And this winter is forecasted to be particularly rough for a lot of people. So my hearts go out to you, the farmers. But actually, fuck the farmers, because they're kind of part of the problem. If you are a dairy farmer, my heart doesn't go out to you. I'm not praying for
we're
you.
not. This is not for the dairy farmers.
I'm praying for the small farmers, and I am praying that God rains hellfire upon the industrial farmers.
Yes, precisely, because the chickens and the cows and all of the animals that are stuffed in cages deserve better. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's good. Fuck the commercial farmers, praying for the small town farmers who are just want to give something to the farmers market and stuff like that.
Just a small town girl
plowing in a lonely world.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's see. What is Kale praying for? Kale is praying for, it's getting that time of year where people start buying Christmas gifts. And I am praying for people like me who absolutely hate waiting to give and get Christmas gifts, because I have been trying to give Eden her Christmas gifts relentlessly. Because as soon as I get it, I get so excited about giving it to the person that I hate waiting. So.
Just remember to have gum.
Oh, word?
Let me put that right there on my little...
On the crystal, you just keep putting gum there.
Yes, I don't know. The one thing that I have about Christmas gifts, it has to wait until Christmas, at least. I don't know.
Valid. My parents every year, when I was younger, I can wait to get my gifts, but I don't like waiting to give them, I guess.
That makes sense. Makes sense. You're like, but I want to give you now.
Yeah, because whenever we were younger, my parents would be like, so do y'all want Santa to come early after we had, spoiler alert, Santa's not real. So when my parents finally told us they would be like, do y'all want Santa to come early, on Christmas Eve? And be like, hell no. I want to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
And I want mom to burn the tomato gravy she tries to make. I want to smell the fire alarm as I play with my toys.
Yes.
That is my Christmas morning.
Tradition. Mm-hmm.
I bet did y'all's family do Santa?
Girl, no.
I didn't think so.
No,
I did not think so.
Mama, that's sacrilegious.
Yeah.
We were from the moment we were born, our dad was very adamant of they are not believing in Santa Claus. Mm-hmm. He doesn't speak like that, but in my mind he does.
No, I do the same thing. Yeah. Any voice I do is going to be a country accent.
Exactly. No, they very much were against the idea of us believing in Santa. Mm-hmm. I was, oh my God, this is so cringe. I was the asshole kid who would
went around told other people
he's not real.
There was whenever I was in I kind of, sort of with God, I stopped believing in it, but I continue to believe in it just for tradition's sake, I guess, almost.
Just kind of it's going to cause less friction.
And so I was almost a Santa Claus apologist in the sense of Christian apologetics, trying to defend Santa Claus.
His existence,
and I'd be
well, you never know.
No, of course not. There of course isn't a 100 years old man who is continually to bring you gifts. There is a ghost, however.
That was when Christians are like, it's not literally like a father up in the clouds.
No.
It's an all-knowing spirit beyond their comprehension.
Exactly. Speaking of unknown things beyond our comprehension, would you like to talk about some things that were beyond, most people's comprehensions?
I thought you were about to try and sell me a timeshare or something.
Yeah.
In heaven.
In heaven. Yeah, do you want a timeshare? That literally is like, do you want to like pre-order your mansion?
Shore up wealth in the, yeah.
Yeah. Except, well, we'll talk about art like heaven itself on a different day, because heaven is like, the biblically accurate heaven is not streets of gold and mansions. It's literally just existing with God the Father.
It's nirvana.
It's nirvana, yeah.
The thing that was like, oh, so your idea of heaven is a moneyless, classless society in which we are all equal? That was
where you don't have to worry. Crazy.
But heaven, as scary as it is, in theory, is not nowhere near as bad as like hell.
Yeah.
From my side of things. And you're talking a little bit about something similar today.
Yes, I am. Today, I will be talking about something that is sort of recently being researched. It sort of all started to be, like, during the pandemic, as I'll talk about later, is whenever it really started to, like, be obvious. And so I'll be talking about rapture anxiety.
Ooh.
So picture this.
Okay.
It's a Saturday morning. You wake up a little late. You slept in. You go into the living room. Mom's not there. Where's mom? Mom's normally in the kitchen making, lunch, making breakfast, or she's like mowing the yard. Dad's normally not there, but you go and check in there anyway. Dad's not there. Your brother is also not there. So you begin to panic a little bit because where's everyone? Where did everyone go? And then your mind goes, oh my God, the rapture happened and I was left behind. This is probably something similar that everyone can experience, or when you hear any weird or like unfamiliar noise. Like there was one time that I think it might have been like Camp Shelby in Hattiesburg doing some military training, but I just heard this really loud drone sound. And this was after I stopped believing in God, but I was still like, hey, remember what I said earlier about not believing in you? Let me take that back real quick. God, thank you. Only you can save me.
As soon as you start hearing something that may be able to be interpreted as like angelic trumpets, mama, you find God real quick.
Living near a military base, every time I hear the bugle call, I'm like,
Gabriel?
That's Gabriel comes out and playing. Yeah.
That would be the corniest, mama. I could be faced with that and be like, okay, I believe in you now, but lame.
Lame.
Mama.
You couldn't give a little like color notes in there. Couldn't do something a little atonal.
Nothing. We're American in the gig.
So before we talk about rapture anxiety, I'd like to give you what the Bible says about the rapture, and specifically the ones that, at least in my experience, contribute the most to my rapture anxiety.
Okay. For the people who aren't really familiar with the term, could you explain a little bit about what rapture
anxiety
is?
That's what these verses do. I was gonna do that with the verses, yeah. But go ahead and do it. The rapture is the idea of sort of like Armageddon or apocalypse in the Bible, not the tribulation, but this is whenever Jesus comes back to earth and the church goes to be with him. The dead in Christ shall rise to meet him in the air, and then those that remain shall be changed in a moment. At the midnight cry, we'll be going home. I was quoting the midnight cry, a hymn.
Yeah.
So the first verse or passage that I want to look at is Luke 17:34 through 36. I tell you, on that night, 2 people will be in one bed, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding grain together. One will be taken and the other left. And you've probably seen a lot of these videos shown, maybe. I certainly saw a lot of them in the early 2000s of like, it would just show like people doing things and it would like simulate the rapture where, there'd be people driving a car and then there'd be car wrecks everywhere because the people driving the car suddenly vanished. Which, I mean, if the rapture was real, that is how it would go down. So yeah, that one sort of fuels the fear of like, just the fact of, because hypothetically, again, if this was real, whenever those other people disappear, immediately everyone who's left is like, oh shit.
Oh shit, mama.
It was real.
It was real. Oh,
Yeah.
So you mean
that was the fear of like people vanishing and me being like, oh.
And at that point, in theory, it's too late.
It's too late, depending on your interpretation of when the rapture happens.
So it's like,
Which we'll get to.
oh shit. So it was all real, and now it's the apocalypse.
And now there's nothing I can do about it. Word. The next one I want to look at is Mark 13:24 through 27. But in those days following that distress, referring to the tribulation, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time, people will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. And he will send his angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of the heavens. And this one always scared me. Like, even to this day, if there is like a week where it's really dark and stormy and rainy, I would fall into this depression because I'd be like, there's never going to be another sunny day. Like, this is it. Like, Jesus is coming.
Is life
this
now.
is, yeah. And it's just going to be dark forever.
Yeah.
Because God is coming back and like, this is the end of times.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, even now I get a little bit scared. And also at night, I think it's part of the reason that like night scares me is because a lot of times I always pictured like the rapture would happen in the middle of the night.
Really?
Yeah. Because I distinctly remember when I was 5 years old, I had a dream that we knew the rapture was coming. Mm-hmm. And so my last day on earth, when the sun rose, I went to Cracker Barrel with my grandparents. And then I just hung out at their house.
That is so cute though.
Yeah, I distinctly remember that. And so after that, every night I prayed, dear God, please let Mama and Papa live until Jesus comes.
Oh my God.
I had this list of prayers I would go through, but like I prayed that every night, like just hoping that everyone lived until Jesus comes.
Just let them get,
Which is part of rapture anxiety, I would say, is fearing that like, that not everyone's going to make it to the rapture because...
I also think that part of rapture anxiety is just like not only being afraid of it happening randomly when you're unexpected or whatever, but just like the basis of that being that you feel deep down that it's going to happen in your lifetime.
Oh, well,
like,
I'll get to that because that's like a very important part of like the way the rapture is taught in most churches. And then the last one that I want to look at is Mark 13:32. And it says, But about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. And so just saying it could happen at any time. It is imminent, though, because the Bible says it is immediately after Jesus ascends. That is when the end times start. That's when the last days start. Mm-hmm. So ever since the beginning of the apostles spreading Christianity, it has been well known that Jesus coming back is imminent, and every single generation believes truly in their heart that it will be in their lifetime. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think that's something really interesting. Is it almost that's why in my heart where I believe that I was raised in a cult because. Especially the way that I interpreted the Christianity that I was given. I was in a doomsday cult. Mm-hmm. I was gearing up for the end of the world.
Yes. They all half of evangelical Christianity, if not the vast majority, works as a doomsday cult. Mm-hmm. It just gets away with not being labeled or understood as that because it's so mainstream.
Right.
If this was a small group of people that prescribed those beliefs, people would be like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Y'all literally believe in a second coming of your deity that's gonna end the world?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, girl.
Weird.
That's I don't know. I'm also really struck by the poetry of these verses. Mm-hmm. The stars will fall from the sky.
Yeah.
And then the rhythm of from the edges of the earth to the edges of the heavens or whatever. There's so much, I don't know, vivid imagery and beauty kind of in these verses.
Yeah.
It almost feels like it's describing the affect and feeling of maybe
the
death.
world ending.
The world ending.
Yeah.
This feels almost I don't know. You could almost apply this to the rapture is more of what happens when you die. This is the experience of you go to heaven or you go to hell.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it too. Is because that if we're looking at the Bible as symbolism, which a lot of people do who are Christians, that definitely could be the rapture could be a an allegory, I guess, for death. Mm-hmm. So what I'll be talking about today, mainly what I'm gathering this information from is, of course, my own experience, and then also a podcast called The Thinking Atheist.
Awesome.
Where it's just an atheist podcast where they just talk about how silly Christianity is specifically. And then an article that was written by the Washington Post this year. And that article, as I'll talk about later, there's not a whole bunch of research done on rapture anxiety, mostly because it's a very newly, I wouldn't say discovered, but very newly talked about thing because it's, as I'll talk about, it didn't all of this hullabaloo about the rapture what hasn't always been obviously we've always thought that the coming of Christ was imminent and that we should always be ready. But in the 90s and the late 1900s, things really started to ramp up. Mm-hmm. And that's probably because, of the modernization of technology and the futuristic feel. And everyone's oh, we're nearing the end. Mm-hmm. things are getting too crazy.
And also, I don't know, in my mind, that almost feels like an act of desperation. Because it's like, as America was becoming more secularized slowly but surely, and as these younger generations were obviously starting to move away from the church, the millennials especially, and now our generation even more so, it's almost like you have to get increasingly more like, you can't even just use fire and brimstone hell imagery. You have to use like, it could happen at any moment. And everything could be awful.
And the idea that, well, I'm not going to get ahead of myself. Okay. I'm going to continue. I was about to go on a tangent. So, in Christian cultures, like I was saying, it's usually the idea of the rapture is celebrated. And it's like, oh, I cannot wait. Like, I'm hoping that Jesus can come back like any day now and I'll be ready to meet him in the sky. And there's this mentality that's like in my lifetime, which has always been the case. So, which is just kind of silly that everyone is convinced that the second coming of Christ will happen in their lifetime. Me, however, whenever they talk about the rapture, I was terrified. The book of Revelation, terrified. And that would lead to feelings of like, am I even a Christian? Like, this is something I'm supposed to be excited about and joyous for, and I am terrified that it's going to happen. And so, like, it led to me constantly doubting myself, and I found myself, like, constantly praying for salvation because I was just so afraid of the rapture happening and, because especially, like, growing up how we did, that would mean my entire family was gone. And that would leave me completely alone, which is a terrifying thought for, oh, by the way, at this time I'm 9. Just going on in a 9-year-old's head, 7, 8, 9-year-old.
Average childhood of a child raised in an evangelical home.
So absolutely terrifying. And it's scary that I was like afraid for my salvation because according to the Bible, there's nothing that we can do to earn salvation. We can only accept it. And so I was like, it just led to this feelings. And I think, you know what? I just had a revelation mid-sentence. Speaking of revelations. I think that is where the feeling of there is something wrong with me comes from because I could never feel secure in my salvation. And so I always was like, this is a you problem.
Same.
So, oh, word. Cool. Yeah. Just casual. Divine revelations on this podcast.
That's why I always say for me, that's like a religious guilt thing. Because as a child, especially as my siblings slowly started to be like, I like am converted now, I'm born again or whatever, I would self-flagellate and cry myself to sleep. Not to get too real on the pod or whatever, but like I hated myself and would like sink into these deep like existential dreads and anxiety and like panic attacks over like, why can't I feel him? Like, why can't I see you? Like, Jesus, if you're there, why do I feel alone in this room? Mama.
If I came.
And like, it was, Mama, that is a matter of eternal life and death.
Exactly. And it is so much stress that is the most important decision that you'll ever make.
And the fact that you can't just choose to make it. You're like waiting on it to happen.
So it just leaves, especially like kids who were already struggling with like identity issues. It just sort of leaves this feeling of like, why can't I feel it? Like what is wrong with me that I cannot experience this peace and affirmation in knowing what will happen whenever this is all over?
And insidiously, it like by the very nature of that ideology, it instills those feelings in anyone who is the type of person to question those systems of power and to
which
feel
just,
like okay,
feeds
like
into it.
Like I can't like just feel this. I can't just go along with this. I need to understand it. Like I don't see it. I don't feel it. And if you like think that way and experience the world that way, then you would be likely to be the one to change the system. But because of that, the system makes you feel insane and alienates you and like beats you down. It's crazy.
So all of that to say, there has been a recent attention brought to a sect of religious trauma that has been named rapture anxiety. So the rapture became a widely discussed topic in the early 19th century, but it really exploded in media in like the late 20th century. And some of that media included Hal Lindsey's 1970 best-selling book, The Late Great Planet Earth. And this is sort of where people began to interpret current world events as signs of the second coming or a sign of the end times, because especially like my dad he loves Christian apologetics. That was what he, got his Masters of Divinity in or whatever. Ooh. Yeah. Ooh. Which is such a silly, Masters of Divinity sounds so cool.
When I was a kid, I was like, oh, so that's magic school?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I want to do that. Girl.
Yeah.
Give up the ghost.
I also thought that when you got your master's degree, you were like now like Master Tweety.
Let's make it a thing.
So yeah, that you still see that now is like Christians love to say like all of these prophecies are being fulfilled. Like the return of Christ is imminent. Like we can look and see the only prophecy that hasn't been fulfilled yet is the rapture. So, and then he also wrote a 1972 thriller called A Thief in the Night, which is just, reinforcing that idea that, like, he'll come, like, it'll happen so fast and, like, people won't know what's happening, which sets the stage perfectly for the Antichrist to come in and, the Book of Revelation is so icky. And the most well-known one is the 1990 series by Tim LaHaye and Jerry B. Jenkins, Left Behind, which got turned into a movie starring Kirk Cameron, and then there was a reboot starring Nicolas Cage.
Shout out Nicolas Cage.
And I remember... first, there's two things about this movie that I want to talk about. I'm specifically referring to the Kirk Cameron run. I haven't seen the Nicolas Cage one.
If we were ever talking about something on this podcast and there's a Kirk Cameron version, we're talking about that
We're talking about Kirk Cameron plagued our childhood. Fireproof in this bitch.
Fireproof. Daddy Kirk Cameron.
He did this one special, I remember so vividly, where he went and asked kids, like at a college, to name all the liquors they knew or alcoholic drinks they knew, and then to name all the 10 Commandments they knew, just to be like, these kids don't know shit. And so,
what a fucking loser.
Throughout my life, I constantly made sure that I knew I had Kirk Cameron anxiety. I thought he was going to show up and ask me about the 10 Commandments.
Him popping out of a potted plant. What commandments do you know?
What are all the liquors you know? Me trying to block out anytime I heard a name of alcohol. No, Kirk Cameron, no.
That thing that's like, Akira. But it's like rum and coke.
No. But what I remember distinctly about those movies is the mark of the beast was like a barcode that they would tattoo on you, and they would like scan it.
Which is so like, first of all, heavy-handed. Like, I get the like capitalist whatever thing. But second of all, with the history we have of actually tattooing numbers on people in this world, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Evangelical Christians.
What
are you doing?
We can ask that many times. What are you doing?
So, question for the culture.
And then I remember at the end, because obviously with a book about, the tribulation and like life after the rapture, there's not really going to be a happy ending for the people that are the main characters. So, in the movie, everyone who became a Christian became really, really sick. And at the end, they discovered that the cure was red wine because they were sinning when they drank it.
What? Red wine.
I think that's how it went. It might be something different, but knowing Kirk Cameron, Kirk Cameron would not make red wine the cure.
Kirk Cameron absolutely would not.
Not in a Kirk Cameron world.
Well, if you had known the 10 Commandments instead of knowing different brands of Pinot Noir, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Bitch.
Speaking of like Left Behind and that, there's a lot of differing opinions of the rapture. So in the Book of Revelation, it talks about, the rapture and something that's called the Great Tribulation, which is a 7-year period where basically hell on earth happens. All hell breaks loose And so there are some pastors, including my father, he never really preached about this idea. He preached on Revelation a good bit, but never his own personal opinions about it because he didn't think it really mattered too much. Because if you're saved, you're saved. It's not going to matter. But some people believe that the church will go through the tribulation before the rapture. And so saying that once the rapture happens, it is over, there is no chance. Which is why a lot of people are will call people the Antichrist whenever something happens. So those are usually the people that believe that the church will be here and will prevail through the tribulation, which also is why Christians get real.
And is also implying that we're in the end times now.
Oh yeah,
and it feeds that kind of sense of urgency.
But there's also a book. I don't remember who, but I don't remember. I think I learned it in
The
AP
Perks
Euro.
of Being a Wallflower.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But saying that there had been 3 antichrists, and the first one was Hitler, and then, or not the first one was Hitler, the first one was Attila the Hun, I think. And then Hitler, I don't remember. I know Hitler was one of them, but then the third antichrist will be the antichrist.
That's so I don't know. That's so what if there were 3? Let me think of 2 really bad people, and then we'll say that there's going to be a third one.
Yeah.
That is so a reverse engineering, the truth.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So, yeah, throughout political history, people love to point at someone who gives a differing opinion of them and say they're the Antichrist.
What if I am the Antichrist?
What about it?
What about it?
What am I going to do? I'm going to try to comfort their people in the time of need?
I sexually identify as an Antichrist.
And then there's other people who believe that the rapture will happen and then the tribulation, which would mean which is what I heard about most of my childhood was like the rapture would happen and then the tribulation would happen because there was still a chance for salvation during the tribulation. You would just die a horrible death. Easy trade.
Easy trade.
You get heaven, but also you get killed gruesomely.
That's like, I feel like that's the more popular belief, especially amongst like American evangelicals, because it positions the rapture as like they get called up for heaven and then they get to feel vindicated for being right the whole time. Then they get to look down and be like, look at y'all.
But also,
and they don't have to suffer.
And one of the things I used to think about when I was a kid, because like I was kind of grateful, was like, oh, if the rapture happens and I'm left behind, there is still hope. I will die a horrible death, but there will still be hope. But I was also scared that I wouldn't be able to face that death, and then I would just end up like, pussying out of heaven.
Pussied out of heaven?
Yeah.
Your new album?
Pussied
out of heaven.
But I always thought about the people who got saved during the tribulation. Imagine getting to heaven and being like, hey, how y'all doing?
I'm one of the secondhand Christians.
Sorry, I only believed after everyone disappeared.
They have to sit like on the sidelines while they play the yearly football game.
Yes. So the people who believe that the church will go through the tribulation means that they will experience the apocalypse, which can lead to some really wacky conspiracies like I talked about, like pointing at people and calling them Antichrist. But this kind of goes back to like where the recent discussion of rapture anxiety came from. When COVID happened, a lot of conservative Christians began saying that the vaccine was the mark of the beast.
Girl, they love to call everything the mark of the beast.
Do you remember those TikToks that was like, you can say what you like, but I'd rather die? And it was like people like just videoing themselves like dying because they won't take the vaccine.
Which, mama, you will. Stop. Christians love to make themselves the victim in any way possible.
They would like show themselves like getting beaten, stoned to death. And I was like, what is this like torture porn almost? Like they are so addicted to the idea of suffering.
It's literally a victim complex.
Yeah.
It's like they feel they're most vindicated and powerful, and like they want to feel like everyone is out to get them and that they're the weakest people, and yet in the face of it, they remain pure.
It's like we talked about last week. Yeah.
Yeah.
They love to, like, if they're trying to convince everyone else of something, but that's not working, they're like, why don't you believe me? You hate me. I'm oppressed. Yeah. That's the pipeline.
That's the thought process. Step 1, 2, 3.
Step 4, profit.
Televangelists.
Exactly. So all of this is honestly the idea that the rapture would happen and then the tribulation, I think is really what attributes. If you don't know, I have some real doomsday prepper tendencies, as a lot of deconstructioned Christians do. It's also similar like to the LDS church, shout out Sam. They're also doomsday preppers. Yep. And so it also led to me becoming so detached from the present because I was so afraid from the future. But at the same time, it made it so hard. Even now, it's so hard for me to envision my future because I was so convinced that I would not make it to adulthood. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I'm never going to get married. I'm never going to have kids. And that was part of the thing that was so sad. It's like, I'm not going to live a fulfilled life. And like, I can still find myself thinking even now, like if I picture, I started like I could never picture myself getting, being in high school show choir. I know that's a silly one, but that was like really important to me. And then I was like, oh, I'm never going to make it to college. And it's like, oh, I'm never going to get married. It's just constantly like, oh, I'm never going to make it that far, which is just not a healthy line of thinking.
Not a healthy line of thinking at all. I also like that's a side effect of what I think one of the main. Oh, you talked about kind of the way your dad approached the rapture. My dad was always. It's this weird thing he would do a lot where it's almost like he pointed out the way that Christianity works to like manipulate behind the scenes, but he almost pointed to that as like, no, this is just really what it is, as if it's like a good thing. But anyway, like long story short, what he would say is like, I don't really care about like the literal interpretations of the rapture, like who's right, who's wrong. That's not the important thing. The important thing is that it's trying to remind us is that like he could come back at any moment, just like you could die at any moment.
Right.
And you would better like be sure now then forever that your soul is ready, because it's to counteract the idea that you can wait until you're on your deathbed, or that it's not urgent, or that it's not all pressing, or that it's not something that needs to be on your mind constantly. And like that's kind of what the rapture serves as, this oppressive looming cloud. And then if you take that and it like extrapolate it to its extent, that means your whole life is lived under like that fear.
Exactly.
And so the only thing your mind is allowed and supposed to and learned to like focus on is Christian tenets of living, you know? And it's like, yeah, it clears out all other plans and only leaves the Christian path forward.
Which is why I also think it is so, because when you're focused so much, and this is like an obvious point, when you're focused so much on your next life, like what the fuck is the point of this life?
Literally,
it's like just your test. I'm gonna test you.
Oh, I'm gonna test you.
I'm gonna test you.
The Book of Job.
You failed. Hell. Yeah.
You failed.
Immediate hell. I think this is a great time for an ad break before we get into some anecdotal stories.
For sure.
Hi there, all you sexy single seraphim. Have you been looking for a way to have your eyes everywhere all at once? How about some googly eyes? That way, even when the demons don't think you're watching, they'll see those googly eyes and they'll be like, oh shit, God knows.
Give us a little jiggle. This week's episode is brought to you by Fireball Sack Whiskey. Are you afraid that Kirk Cameron is going to jump out of a potted plant and ask you what liquors you know? You don't know any because you're too drunk off of Fireball Sack Whiskey.
Thank you so much to our sponsors again for sponsoring us, because that's what sponsors do. They sponsor. The sponsorships.
Mama,
Sponsors.
It's the Hunger Games.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we have talked about the Hunger Games in almost every episode.
We're obsessed. You are in your Hunger Games era.
I go through this like every 6 months.
Yes, as you should.
As I should. So the next part that we're going to talk about is from that Washington Post, not Wall Street Journal, Washington Post article. And a lot of these are going to be like...
the wall article, writing on the wall.
The writing on the wall.
The writing on the wall, bitch.
So this is going to be like a lot of just, anecdotal stories, because that's most of the evidence that we have is anecdotal evidence. So there's a therapist named Mark Gregory Karras, who is the author of the book The Diabolical Trinity that was released this year. And like I said, he says that there has been little research done on rapture-related traumas, but the anecdotal evidence suggests that people can experience anxiety, fear, and disrupted life plans because of such teachings, the imminent rapture, the torment of those left, and the need to win God's approval and mercy. Mm-hmm. So, like, in the end, like, at least people feeling that planning for the future is futile. Mm-hmm. There's also this sense, like we talked about earlier, of guilt and shame that comes with not wanting the rapture to happen because you wanted to live a full life. Mm-hmm. So it just kind of, like, stacks on top of each other, because the shame and the anxiety, because I was talking about last week how the two things that I feel the most are rapture anxiety and guilt and shame. But as we had that divine revelation, the guilt and shame probably stems back from the fact that I was scared. I did not want the rapture to happen.
The two main things I feel are bloated and horny. So
Word.
I think I'm a little bit behind you, but I'll get there.
Valid. Have you no shame?
I'm too bloated to feel shame.
So we talked about in our first episode, our Halloween episode, hell houses.
Hell houses.
And they were also a way to fuel this rapture anxiety, because at least the ones that I've been to or that I participated in all sort of like centered around like the tribulation or like an imminent rapture. Mm-hmm. They would take current issues like gun control or abortion or wars or taking prayer out of school, and they would just blow it up way bigger than it is, and someone would always die. There was one hell house where a woman was dying, and so she had an abortion. They had, like, the baby died, and then she died and went to hell.
Because that is insane to me. The people who literally give those fucking interviews, or even the moms who say shit like, if an abortion would if like not having an abortion would kill me, I still wouldn't do it. Why?
So you want that child to not have a mother growing up?
And your other children? Just because so you can feel some weird sense of vindication?
Some savior complex, yes. I guess. Yeah. But the one that I remember specifically was it happened at my great uncle's church in Laurel. But we would go in and we would watch this little video, and it was like a news report. And it was saying that, breaking news, the new president has just issued a burning of all Bibles that will be held at town hall. Failure to comply will result in punishment. And so the first scene was like everyone throwing their Bibles away. And then you had the secret Bible meetings, and then, someone broke in and shot up the place because they're breaking the law. They're a bunch of Christians love to call themselves outlaws and rebels.
They do. They love to think of themselves as like countercultural in some way. Mama, this is the culture.
Yeah.
You are the foundation of this nation.
If you don't like this, you made it.
You made it, bitch. Sorry about it. This is
like we talked about last week. This can all be stemmed back to your religious extremism.
Literally, your puritanical bullshit.
Yeah, emphasis on the tyrannical.
Emphasis on the purr.
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 Okay, purr.
Okay, purr.
So they also interview a woman named Diana Fraser. And she talks about her experience with sort of not feeling attached to any sense of future, not feeling a need to continue. She put a pause on her education after her associates because she felt that the rapture and the coming of Christ was so imminent that there was no point in getting her degree and getting another degree. And it was more dangerous for her to be separated from her church family than to get a career, to like get an education. All of that didn't matter. And that was so irrelevant. This
is the shit I'm talking about. Like, it's designed insidiously to like empty out everything except for Jesus. It's almost like the best of both worlds of like doomsday cult shit, and that it's like it's this imminent like looming threat, so it makes your followers like fanatics, and it makes anyone like on the outside feel like they need to get in. But it also doesn't have any specific date or time. So that creates like a kind of panopticon effect, but it also means it can never be proven wrong.
Yeah.
You can never say like, oh, the date passed, the rapture didn't happen. Mama.
Yeah.
It could happen at any moment.
Yeah, that is a significant difference. And of course, there's been people, a lot of Christian offshoot cults will try to predict, and also like LDS offshoot cults will try to predict the coming of Christ. And there's been countless people who have said, this is when he's going to come back. This is when Jesus is coming back, but it comes and goes and nothing ever happens of it. Like, I think whenever Y2K, it's always tangentially related to like other stuff. Like there was a big thing saying he was going to come back in the year 2000 with Y2K. And then there was another one in 2012. So those, especially during those times, I remember the day that the world was supposed to end. I was in 7th grade sitting in like my IT class.
It was in December of 2012.
It was December of 2012. I think December, it was...
I remember because it was before my birthday.
It was right before Christmas break.
And I was like, but I won't get to have my birthday.
Oh, no!
I want to be 11.
And I remember just sitting there being like, damn, I never even got to kiss someone. I was like, what if Jesus comes back before I get to fuck?
That's what's going through everybody's head.
Oh, absolutely.
That's why they get married so young.
Yeah, because what if Jesus comes back and I didn't get to fuck? Because there'll be no sex in heaven?
Mama, none. We're all getting fucked over because there's nothing to do but sit around and bask in the glory.
So boring.
Snooze fast. Jesus, get a new trick. You just glow.
This woman actually left during COVID.
Shit.
And she's actually going back to school now to get a degree to be a therapist.
What was her name?
Diane Fraser.
Diane, we know you're listening.
Diana,
so
my
proud
bad.
of you. Diana.
So proud.
Diana, we know you're listening too.
But it really takes something. There was actually quite a few cults, or like not really cults, but fundamentalist Christian religions that sort of fell apart. There's one specifically called the 2x2s. And they were also like a really heavy, like on the rapture being imminent. But during COVID, they were still telling people that they needed to, have these meetings, because if you weren't at these meetings, it meant you were at risk from falling out of the way. And if you fell out of the way, then you wouldn't be taken home in the rapture.
Yeah.
Which led a lot of people to be like, so you're telling me that God cares more about me being there than protecting my family?
Yep.
And so just things didn't start to add up. And so that led to a lot of people leaving that specific sect.
That's kind of like what we touched on last week a little bit, talking about identity, is like people are not going to change their belief systems unless
they are challenged.
Yes, unless their material conditions like force them to like reassess them.
Right.
If nothing changes materially in someone's life, then there's no reason that their beliefs would follow suit. You can't just like talk someone into believing something else. Like it has been known to happen, but it's very, very rare.
Yeah, and that's why, and that's another reason, kind of off topic, but that's why I always found it so silly that people would get into theological debates or, debates on grandeur, because Obviously, if you're debating about it, you are both so convinced that nothing is going to change your mind.
It's literally just to feel powerful and flex.
Yeah.
Like, look at everything I know.
Yeah, like me looking up atheists get burned.
No, literally.
On YouTube.
The Ben Nye versus the creationist debate at the Creation Museum. Girl.
Which was just, set up for failure. Also, the Creation Museum, the Ark and the Ark exhibit.
Girl. A Creation Museum episode incoming.
Yeah.
That shit is stupid.
That shit is, oh my god. And like they have things about saying how dinosaurs, and since they can no longer dispute that dinosaurs existed, they're now saying that dinosaurs existed along with Adam and Eve instead of millions of years before humans existed.
Which is so like I know we all know, but like, can we just take a moment to appreciate how fucking stupid that is?
Yeah.
To just be like, no.
It's just like things are constantly happening. Also, this is really
Things are constantly happening, and I'm about tired of it, quite frankly. Can we put a moratorium on things happening?
No more things are gonna happen.
No more things happening.
The rapture. Well, no, after the rapture, lots of things will happen, but then a lot of nothing.
But then a lot of nothing.
The rest of eternity, a lot of nothing.
And this is the history of time in terms of things.
They have things that have happened, everything. Things left to happen, nothing.
And that's time.
And
hey.
time is a thing that you put on the wall or wear it on your wrist.
We're not going down that road.
Where was I going with this? Oh, yeah. So one thing that I specifically remembered on this topic of when I first learned about Pangea, I was like, oh, word? And so I went in my Bible and I was like, let's see. And then I found a verse in Genesis that said, and during his time, the earth moved. And I was like, oop, biblical evidence for Pangea. Science, once again, has later proven when the Bible said it first.
It's like, everyone knows there was a large flood, and the Bible talks about that. And it's the only one to do that, right? Gilgamesh isn't real. Who's that?
Oh, you mean every major religion or mythology system has an account of the flood? But the Bible definitely did it first, and that's what everyone's copying.
Yeah, in other words, the one true religion. Girl.
Yeah, we did a whole VBS about the flood, and it was of course, because it was my dad that put it together. It was an apologetics about why we know the flood actually happened, and it was like showing how Mount St. Helen could create like 1,000 years of erosion in like a couple of seconds. And I was like, you don't think that maybe there was natural disasters that were similar that also created like the Grand Canyon? Like, we're not saying there wasn't a flood. We're not denying there wasn't a flood. There probably was. But why is your account right?
Literally. And we can't even. We have to do like an episode broadly on apologetics, but also there's so many different things that like within apologetics, kind of as a specific. Almost, I want to say discipline, but it's more like a content creation factory. It's apologetics within the system of Christianity. It just works as a subsect whose jobs is to churn out like talking points, basically.
Yeah.
Like take something and turn it into a thing, like
Committing
the flood.
Committing every rhetorical like faux pas that there is.
Every fallacy imaginable. Rhetorical faux pas. I love that. Ooh.
So, and there's also an account of a man who no longer believes in the rapture, but his body still does, which is sort of what I was talking about, because we know now that like the therapist I was talking about, he talks about like, there's phantom limbs and there's also phantom ideas, because we know like how trauma works. It is stored in the nervous system. We hold memories and traumatic events there. And so even though we may be away from that now, our body has not forgotten.
Trauma is stored in the nervous system, and pee is stored in the balls.
Exactly.
Mama.
Which goes back to when I was saying, like, anytime that I hear, like, an unfamiliar sound, like, I don't believe in the rapture anymore, but my body just, like, is filled with fear. Because I'm like, oh, shit, I was wrong. Something's happening.
Literally, I think that being terrified as a child and being told that, like, people will like leave Christianity all the time, or people will like refuse to answer the call, and then when they die, like they'll regret it all, but it's too late then. And so leaving Christianity,
There's such a fear.
Yes, I feel like it's something that and maybe you neither will ever be able to truly completely shake, is just this insidious narrative that is meant to remain with you, that it's like, by leaving it, you're just becoming like another example of like the people who, you know, were
Which
given
is-
the opportunity and turned away.
Like you said, it really is insidious once you have left Christianity, when you can look at all of the tactics, which are mostly fear-mongering fear tactics, that are used to like force you to say. There was this infographic that this girl that I like used. She's like a couple years older than me. She has a kid who's like 3 now, which is insane to me. But talking about how most people will accept Christ between the ages of 7 and 16, which is not the flex you think it is.
No.
And that your chances of like becoming a Christian after the age of 19, you know, when you go to college,
When you're exposed to other ideas.
yeah, dramatically decrease. And so just the idea that this entire system of belief, like the people that the concept of the rapture is being preached to and being indoctrinated into is children.
Literal
you are
children.
literally instilling this fear within children, and that will keep them bound to this religion out of fear of something else, like something terrible happening to them, like being left behind.
Being left behind, being tortured in hell afterwards.
Being tortured in hell.
Losing their family, like having them ripped
being
away.
completely separated.
And being told that it's their fault because they are fundamentally a bad and wicked
Right.
and evil person who has not accepted Christ.
But again, there's nothing you can do to save yourself.
Nothing you can do. I think the thing that makes me the most angry about that shit and the other shit in Christianity like it is that I know none of those parents involved will ever be able to accept the fact or like realize or even understand the damage that they're doing.
No.
Because in their mind, like no matter what, until they die, their ego will not let them realize that is abuse and damage and how
Right.
deep, like they cannot allow themselves to empathize with that
Yes.
child, because then for a moment they would realize how evil that fucking is.
And that's why like child abuse and different types of child abuse, but also physical, like run rampant within like Christian communities, especially the ones that are the more isolated you are from like the secular world, the worse it gets.
Much worse.
Just because you like God said, like you believe that everything you are doing is just, and the things that you are teaching and the values you are instilling and the fears you're instilling are for the greater good.
For the
and you are
greater good.
protecting them from something else.
And also, when all you know is systems of power, domination, and control, then that is all you know how to enact on others, and all you
Yeah.
know how to like operate under. So
And-
fathers and mothers abuse their children, like preachers abuse their congregation. Like it's awful.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that I've also struggled with. Like once I have left Christianity, is like for a little while it just felt like there was something missing because I wasn't constantly, you know, being led.
Yep.
Or so I'm just like, oh, what do I do now? Which is deconstruction is an identity crisis in and of itself. But whenever like the whole idea of this religion was to have like, I mean, obviously the Protestants is a very like individualistic religion, but you also like have the spiritual leader of the pastor who also was my father. So he was my leader in the home and in the church. And so basically just which lead could never leave to some weird attachments or some weird. Yeah.
No.
But just that feeling of there's no one telling me what the right thing to do is, or there's no one like I have to make decisions on my own. I have to decide what I believe on my own and what's right on my own. And something else that's very interesting is I don't do too much true crime, but I do love cults just because it helps me a lot sort of categorize what I went through and like find bits and pieces of what I went through in other cults, because all it is like manipulation. But a lot of specifically doomsday cult leaders grew up in church, which is so terrifying that when you have a narcissist growing up in this environment who is fully aware of how, you know, interpersonal relationships work, and they are able to spot out these things and see what Christianity does, and they say, oh, I can do that. I can take these people who have this fear and that are weak and that are looking for guidance, and I can get them on my side, and then I can have them do whatever I want because I am their connection to eternity,
To the divine.
which is
everything.
which is like why I think Christianity is so dangerous is because whenever we talk about like certain like IBLP and stuff, but in like independent fundamentalist Baptists, it is breeding it is a breeding ground for abusers.
Yes, and that keeps on
People
coming
who
up.
prey on the weak.
Prey on the weak, and who prey on people's, like we were saying earlier, like sense of feeling lost, and also their inability to fend for themselves. Like it creates and breeds abusers, because those systems also create and breed victims.
Yes.
If you tell women they can't have jobs and they have to stay home and have babies and raise children, and if you tell children like they have to obey everything that you do and follow as like your father says or whatever, then those people are never going to be able to be in a position to escape those situations, to stand up for themselves, to have power in that community.
Which is why I think it's interesting. I think it mostly has to do with, like, I don't know. That's why I think there's a lot of women with a victim complex that grew up in the church, or at least like were raised as women that had like victim complexes. And then there's also like, especially men who stay in the church. Like I said, it's just a breeding ground for people who know how to manipulate and know how to use power dynamics to their advantage. And they're justified in that, because if you're being told, this is really off topic, but if you're being told that the man is the leader of the house and the spiritual leader of the house, like that, what is the woman supposed to do except for submit and just whatever? She just has to take it because God said.
I don't know what kind of environment you grew up in, like religiously, but I was someone who was raised within Christianity to be like a young man, and like it was deeply upsetting and felt wrong to me for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But for one of the main things was that, like, growing up, I was being like bred and groomed or whatever to be like a strong, upstanding Christian man. And what that meant in so many ways, and what older men would tell me and what I would gain from all of these like lessons and relationships and things, is that what it means to be a mature Christian man is to exercise authority. Like, to be a mature Christian man is
Demand
to have
respect.
Yes, a wife and children who serve you. You are a reflection of God the Father, as you are the father to your family. As the church, as the pastor is the father to the church, as the church is the father to the people. It's all about recreating these oppressive systems, and it places men there at the expense of their own like tender, gentle humanity, and it's a tragedy, honestly.
Yeah, and it comes to affect like their marriages, because I feel like in a lot of typical Christian relationships, there is that wall, like you were talking about, of gentleness and tenderness that is blocking them from seeing their wife, the person that they are supposed to devote their life to and love unconditionally. It puts them in a position to not see them completely human, because it's seen as lesser than them, and they can never see them as an equal, as someone who has complex thoughts and feelings and dreams and desires and hopes and like likes, like hobbies, and it's so upsetting, because that in those situations, if a man can't see those things in his wife, then they're never going to have a true kind of love that every woman deserves, every wife deserves.
And he's also not going to be able to see in his children like the beautiful people and individuals worthy of like this tender gentleness and connection, genuine human connection. He's only ever going to see the relationship as like the teacher, as the like Christian authority, and he has to teach them Christianity. It's never about the actual relationship between them. It's about acting as a conduit through which to serve and create a relationship with God.
I don't know about you, but my dad loved to throw, if we were getting in trouble and he was like yelling at us or letting us have it, he loved to throw on the word exactly like this: child. He would,
mama.
like, love to emphasize the fact that we are the child, and that, like, especially as my brother got older and became, a lot more defiant. They really would butt heads, because my dad is just so heads bent. Like, it just goes back to like that desire to have that power, and whenever someone questions it, like you start to get like, oh no,
so you clamp down harder. It's just
Yeah. So anyway, going back to this last bit of rapture anxiety.
Hearing those keys in the door was my own personal rapture.
Oh my God. Real. Me waking up, is Dad here? No. So the last little thing I'll talk about is there is a professor of religions at Agnes Scott College in Decatur, Georgia, Tina Pippin, and they say that it's not just a theological issue, but a political one, and I think a really dangerous one. 39% of Americans believe that we are living in the end times, and most of them are Christians.
39%?
39%
of the entire United States population
believe that we are like in that this is the end.
Sometimes I forget, like, how fucking Christian this nation is, but that's insane.
And that percentage, especially among radical Christians, is so dangerous because it begins for them to ignore or even welcome large-scale tragedies and, you know, genocides and just deaths, because all of that is making way for the coming of Christ, which isn't, and like, you know, it doesn't matter anyway because Christ is coming back, which is another reason, going back to friend of the pod, Friedrich Nietzsche, another way that, you know, religion is the opium of the people is it can sort of allow you to ignore or sugarcoat terrible tragedies against humanity and just horrible, vile acts by people in power because you believe that this has to happen for the sake of the second coming of Christ and for the sake of the church being, you know, reunited, the bridegroom of Christ.
Well, it's the end times.
It's the end times.
The world's going to hell in a handbasket. What can you do?
It's just a sign. Maybe we feel it now more than ever. People need to repent. The Lord is coming soon and very soon.
Girl, the way that Christians will reduce all of history and like modern time to a spiritual war and ignore all of the material conditions and like human motives behind actions is so fucking like annoying and also harmful because it takes all of the responsibility off of humans and they're very real, very understandable, very like directly addressable motives and actions and puts it on these unapproachable and unknowable spiritual factors that they can feel like they understand better.
And with that comes a sense of arrogance, and with arrogance comes the likelihood of being fooled. And you can see that with like political leaders and people of power. They're aware that they can get away with certain things, and it's foolish to believe that people aren't out there directly playing to these thoughts and beliefs of Christians in order to justify genocide.
Yes.
Like what is happening right now, Christians are saying that this has to happen in order for Christ to return, is that Israel has to be returned, the temple has to be rebuilt. And it's just absolutely disgusting to see that they have become so blinded by their own indoctrination. Maybe it's fear, it's all of these things, but it does not justify it, that they think that such tragic things have to happen in order for them to go to heaven, because it's all about them to go to heaven.
75 years of brainwashing the entire population, like the entire Christian population, into somehow thinking that this colonial project across the seas is that important to their mythological end times that will get them into heaven so that they can point and laugh at the people left behind.
Because it doesn't have to do with gas. It's not about gas.
No, it's not about oil. It's just, no, never was.
It's about rebuilding the temple.
Yeah.
So that is a lot. Yeah. So rapture anxiety and the feeling that the coming of Christ, or the feeling that the end of the world is imminent, can lead to a lot of different things. It can lead to people who have left feeling this sense of still fear and anxiety and feeling it in their body and just hopelessness for the future. And it can also lead to people who are still within the religion, who are looking forward to the rapture, welcoming horrible acts and war and death because for the sake of the greater good.
Yes.
The greater good, in quotes.
The greater good. I am the greatest good.
That you're ever going to get. All right. So now that we're done with that, Sister Eden, do you have a verse of the day for us?
I sure do.
Word?
So today I wanted to bring a verse that we all know and love. One that I would say I had quoted to me the most growing up and that I thought about a lot growing up, that I saw plastered everywhere. That is Leviticus 18.
Oh, Lord. You said Leviticus immediately. I was like, oh, my God.
Leviticus 18, you guessed it, 22. Leviticus 18:22. You are not to sleep with a man as with a woman. It is detestable.
You know that
it is
the
an
translation
abomination.
actually means a child.
Well,
a boy.
we could get into the semantics of the translation, but let's get down to it. What they're really talking about is that
Ancient Hebrew dick in the booty hole.
Ancient Hebrew dick in the booty hole. You can't sleep with a man as with a woman. It's an abomination. That's so true. Mama, if you try and have sex with men the same way that you have sex with women, you're going to be disappointed.
Oh my God.
It's a whole different ballpark. Mama, take it from a bisexual. You have to learn the differences. I can't advise you. You have to figure it out for yourself. The ancient Hebrew bitches knew it. You'll have to figure it out for yourself. But if you take the wrong step, if you try to use your moves that you use on the girlies with the guys, they're going to be caught off guard.
We were talking about this the other day.
Yup.
The moment I get around a woman that is shorter than me, I'm like,
Yup.
hey, baby, what's going on?
Hey, shawty.
Hey.
And they love it.
And they
love it.
Short girls love to be like, oh, hey.
One thing, first of all, in every single, first of all, fuck the TERFs, because they have put out this idea that, lesbians are being, preyed upon by trans women or whatever.
Lesbians being preyed upon.
Even though they're all straight women basically saying this. Mm-hmm. And in every, study, lesbian women are the most accepting of trans people, especially trans women, out of any demographic. Shout out lesbian women.
Shout out lesbians. And except for the ones that are mean to bisexual women.
Also, I can say from personal experience, lesbian women, they love me. They love me. I think it's because I'm tall. Mm-hmm. And the little lesbians, they love a tall girl.
Little lesbians are so interesting.
Hey, if you're a lesbian and you're under 5'6", hit me up.
Word.
But I
That's really gay.
Well, listen, God is gay all the time.
And all the time, God is gay.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Thank you all so much for listening to today's service. Thank you all so much for listening to today's service. And as always, thank you to our music minister, Brother Sam, for creating that beautiful piece of music that is our intro and outro.
And if you are a visitor with us today, if you don't mind hitting that subscribe button and rating us 5 stars wherever you're listening. And if you love the show next week when you come back, why don't you bring a friend?
And remember, God is gay all the time.
And all the time, God is gay.